David Snowden, a Welshman. He did this in 1999, and he said we can look at the world in different domains of order and disorder. On the right-hand side, we've got the two areas of domains of order and these two areas of disorder. Now, this is a sense-making tool. It's not a 2x2 matrix, which is why they're all curly lines. And the thing is, the point is, you need to know what domain you're in. Are we in a simple, complicated, complex, or chaotic environment? And whichever domain you're in depends on which technique you use and which approaches you use, because they're very different. And if you use the wrong one, you get a bad outcome. So let's start with simple. That first game we played, tallest to shortest, very easy, known cause and effect. The causal link is obvious. What you actually did in technical terms is you sense, I'm an idiot, never get that wrong, you categorize and you responded. This is analyze that. Right, so you sense, you categorize and you respond. There's known cause and effect. There's a single best practice. So best here, there's a best practice. Think of a factory. So go back to Toyota, we're building things. What we want to use is statistical process control. Remember what Ford said about you can have any color you like as long as it's black? We reduce the variation and such that any Ford Model T would fit, any component would fit with any car. And you control variation through statistical process control. There's things like Lean Six Sigma, which is all about controlling variation. So we use SPC. And in a factory, known cause and effect, you can repeat it 1,000 times. In terms of games, the game I can think of here is noughts and crosses, or tic-tac-toe. There's only a limited way you can play noughts and crosses. There's a way to guarantee if you're the first player not to lose. It often ends in a stalemate. That's the game, nice and simple, we get it. That's the game we played. Some of the stuff we do here is in a simple domain, and what we want to try and do is maximize the stuff in this domain, because if we make it simple, it means we don't have to think about it. So the daily scrum, it happens at the same time, the same place every day. It's a 24-hour plan. If we make it simple enough that we know where to turn up and where to go, it means we have cognitive space, cognitive ease to think about real problems. So a lot of the framework of Scrum and other things is about making things simple. Complicated. The second game we played, you had to think about it. And to begin with, you said, well, two sets of data, how can that be? And you got into a cognitive lock. And then I said, well, think about an XY axis. And you went, aha, yes, of course. And then where's Chris? You had the aha moment. That's exactly what we want. And now if you wanted to do it again, you would know what to do because you can repeat it. There's more than one best practice. There's only a good practice. And here's the interesting thing, especially for developers. If there's different ways to do these things and you bring an expert in to do it and you tell them how to do it, it pisses them off. And they generally don't do a better job. It's better to give people the autonomy to think out the problem themselves, especially experts. So, a bridge, civil engineers. Now, as a civil engineer, you're a professional, you know all of the science behind the tensile strength of steel and physics and all those things. So whereas there are known knowns here, up here there's known knowns, but there's also known unknowns. So if you ask me to design a bridge, sure, I know how to design a bridge, but I don't know what the base of the river has got. Is it sand? Is it shale? Is it rock? That makes a difference, and how I design it makes a difference. So you need to sense and analyse and respond. And it's fair to say the more analysis you do, the more planning you do, the better chance of success. If you had multiple engineers, different engineers, they'd probably come up with different designs, and that's okay. There's not one good solution. Good practice, we sense, we analyse, we respond. It's complicated. The game I'm thinking of is chess. So if you think of chess, it is still algorithmic in that a computer can still beat a human. It isn't something artistic. There are a finite number of ways you can play chess, finite number of plays you can make. It's 1 times 10 to 120. So more chess moves, potential chess moves, than there are atoms in the universe. It's an enormous number, a 1 with 120 zeros. But a computer can still do it, so it can still be resolved. It is algorithmic still. Much of the stuff we work on here is in this domain, and in the Taylorist economy, in the scientific management model, this works perfectly. Waterfall works really well here. because you plan the work, you work the plan. You know what you need to find out, you find it out, and then you do it. So pre-planning. So if you're building a house, you can use Scrum to build a house, it has been done, but I would recommend having a project plan. I would recommend using project theory. So that's complicated. Now we're moving on to complex, and that's really where we live. This is the human-centered world. We can't predict how humans will behave. Customers don't know what they want. We don't know what the customer wants. The customer doesn't know what they want. They know what they don't want when you show it to them. Okay? Ford said of the Model T, the customer would have asked for a faster horse because they'd never seen a car before. So in the complex domain, things are a little bit different. So here we use statistical process control. Here we use empirical process control. That's the difference. Well, here we control variation. Here we exploit variation. I'll move on to that in a minute. Go back to that game we played just now. So you had a plan. You stood in a part of the room. You picked out another person and thought 8 paces. But as soon as you started walking, they started walking. And you either change your plan or you deliver on budget, on plan, and the customer's not there. And that happens quite a lot. So the way we think here is different to the way we think here. The way we work, the approaches we use. Scrum is an optimal way of working in the complex domain. And there's a few reasons for that. Firstly, small batch size. Why spend a whole year developing something without asking the customer if that's what they want? Better to do it every few weeks. There's a big word coming up now. Probabilistic thinking with a Bayesian mindset. I'll explain it. Think of the game of poker. Now, when you're playing poker, you have absolutely no way of knowing what the other player's hand is. But you could know that you've got an 80% chance of winning that hand. Depending on that probability, your probabilistic thinking is how you'd bet. You still may lose. You may have a 95% chance of winning, and your opposing player has 4 aces or something, right? So you can still always lose. Of course, if you've got 4 aces, you'd know go all in. The thing is, it's not about winning the hand, it's about placing many bets and learning from the bets. Now, this is where the Bayesian mindset comes in. There's a great book on this, by the way. A female world champ poker player, and she could size people up. So she would play poker, and if it was a young lad, she would know that he'd probably learned poker online, and so wasn't really good at reading people. If she was playing someone like me, a middle-aged guy, probably he's going through a midlife crisis, and he's likely to make really wild risks. Now, those are huge assumptions based on generalizations. She may be wrong. But what she would do is have a Bayesian mindset of what she knows her biases are, and she would test those biases. And she would go, I think as a young lad you can't do this, let's see what happens. And then she would prove those assumptions, because we are filled with lots of assumptions. So we test those assumptions. You mentioned MVP before. The technical definition of what an MVP is to test the leap of faith assumption. And that's what we want to do here, is place lots of small bets and test our assumptions of the market. Will the market use this product? Now, we're in a fast-moving, paced economy. Colour TV took 13 years for 50 million people to use it. The telephone was 75 years. How long do you think it took for Facebook to have 50 million users?
3 months.
It was 4 years, actually, because they were in Stanford for a while, 50 million users. How about Angry Birds?
Yeah, that's probably about 3 months.
26 days. How about Pokemon Go? Exactly, right. So the world is becoming much faster. So we can't, like 20 years ago I was working at Sony and we're developing TVs and it'd be a 2.5 year project. We don't have that luxury of time anymore because the whole market, who knows if people are going to be watching TV in 2 years? We just don't know. So we need to have those small batch sizes, run those small experiments, and that's what an MVP is. And so to go back to Angry Birds, that was their 26th iteration, I think it was. So the 25 before were no use. And they thought the market would like it, but they didn't. It was only when they got the 26th iteration they finally hit the market and boom, it went off. So that's what we need to do. We need to change the way we do things. This is where continuous integration, continuous delivery come in. Our customers, I know what we do is quite big, but we should really test the market more often than we do. Now, before anyone tells me, yeah, but the big banks and yeah. Saab created the 5th generation fighter jets, more complex than anything, billions and billions of dollars. You don't get to speak to the customer. Who's the end user? with somebody receiving a bomb, right? Or even the pilot, or even the general, or even the air commander, or whatever. But they did. That's how Saab work, and they have the most adaptive, the cheapest, the most effective fighter jet. Outperforms the F-35 and the French equivalent, and even the MiGs. The Saab Gripen 5 is Gripen D, is the most highly integrated modular fighter jet. And Saab use Scrum top to bottom. They have people making decisions at a product owner level who are able to speak to the end customer. So don't tell me that the banks are too secretive. You know, the European defence agencies. I will show you the paper, it exists. So that's the complex world we live in. And whereas in simple we use SPC, statistical process control, in complex we use empirical process control, which is what Scrum is. The game is poker. I've got software as a service as an example in industry. Here we probe, we sense, we respond, and we have that probabilistic thinking, and we test the market, and we continue to do it with low-cost bets, but many of them. Finally, chaos. Chaos is where you act, you sense, you respond. This is when you're in war. This is when there's an earthquake. You know to jump under the table, but no one tells you what to do after that. No one knows. So there's techniques we use here. Now, just going back to complex, the interesting thing here is politicians and military strategists spend most of their time in here. And if there's a sudden problem, they'll get a group of people in a war room and they will solve the problem together. They bring to bear lots of diverse thoughts and they do lots of what we do in our complex domain. In chaos, politicians sometimes push us into chaos to create a new settling state. I'm thinking of one certain 45th US president at the moment. Now, the other thing is here in simple, if we're in the complex domain and we inadvertently try and apply simple practices or complicated practices, so we try and plan the work, do excessive analysis, or we have a standard operating process, but we're in complex, this here is a cliff. And you fall over that cliff into chaos. So the more you try and control the process, control engineers with timesheets, for example, that's on my mind at the moment, you fall into chaos. People will game the system. It's like the Sam's law. So that, my friends, is Cynefin, Welsh for my habitat or my place. And the important thing is to know what is your habitat. What bits of our work is complex, what is complicated, mostly, and what can we push into simple? Just enough in simple, but not too much. I'm going to quickly go around the room and ask what your insight is, what you're thinking.